Well, it's extremely dangerous, but it follows a strategy carried out by the US, which, by the way, has not yet bought into this recognition. It's only the Israeli regime that recognises that region of Somalia as a separate state. But nevertheless, the US strategy across North Africa has been similar to what it's been in West Asia, to divide and weaken independent states. And it's done that with proxies like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, and now there's terrible murderous gangs supported by the UAE in Sudan, in South Sudan. So we don't know to what extent there's going to be military intervention to support this yet, because the Israelis are the only ones so far there. Although I noticed today that Wikipedia, which is basically a summary of the Western media, recognises Somaliland as a partially recognised state. Partially recognised means that only the Israelis have recognised it, basically. You look at some other states that have little recognition, like South Ossetia, which is a part of Georgia, regarded as a part of Georgia, but there are 5 states that regard that as a separate entity, basically. So, but that's not recognised by Wikipedia as a partially recognised state. So already we see some privileging of this breakaway state, unrecognised state, basically, because the Israelis want it obviously as a strategic foothold at the foot of the Red Sea and the Straits of Bab al-Mandab Straits, basically. And of course, they're concerned about the Red Sea operations that the revolutionary government in Yemen has been carrying out. And the Yemenis, for their part, have said if the Israelis move into the air bases, as is reported, in that region of Somalia, they're going to regard it as a military target straight away. So it's enormously destabilising to the region, to the Horn of Africa.
Well, exactly. It's a very significant part of land that it is recognized. And as you did mention, even though what we just now said in our report that it has categorically been rejected by all countries and international organizations, obviously from what you said, it's already, people are starting to trickle in. The allies of the U.S., of the Zionist entity, continue to support them despite any type of international law. Mr. Anderson, I do want to ask you about the prime minister of this so-called now Somaliland at the moment. Now, he had said before the recognition that if the Zionist entity recognizes us, we will be a place that displaced Gazans can come to. I mean, has this been the plan all along? Egypt will not take them, Jordan will not take them. Is this Netanyahu's way of actually finding somewhere to send the Gazans so he can go ahead and continue his so-called Greater Israel plan?
Actually, I don't think so, really, because it's the Israelis have no real concern about what happens to the Palestinians in Gaza, and they don't really want Palestinians potentially upsetting a convenient military base that they might have at the Horn of Africa. They want that strategic control there. They want to attack the Yemenis. They want to guard their supply to their regime coming in through the Red Sea, basically. And any large number of Palestinians there, if they somehow were able to go there, would certainly be destabilised. Already we've seen people in Somalia and Somaliland itself are protesting against this potential Israeli annexation of that part of Somalia. That's what it is, really. It's more of an annexation in the similar way to which the Emiratis and the Israelis have tried to annex Socotra Island, which is a part of Yemen traditionally, basically, and they're holding tours there and they're trying to exploit the fisheries in the region and so on. So I think it's better to regard it as another annexation of by the Israelis for military purposes in the region.
And Mr. Anderson, lastly, I'd like to go and ask you something, a remark by the Somali ambassador. He called on the Security Council's members to categorically reject any action that undermines his country's unity or infringes upon its own territory. Now, what we have seen from the international community, whether the UNSC, whether the ICJ, anything we've seen, do you think we will see any type of reaction from any international community or specifically the Security Council's members if something does infringe upon the territory and security of Somalia?
Well, formally speaking, there's no other recognition in the United Nations other than from the Israelis, so long as the Israelis are still part of the United Nations, basically. But because their main sponsor, the US, is obviously behind everything that they do, we have to watch what the US is doing there. I think there'll be a consistent response so far from the UN, even from the Security Council, because it's a matter of collective security if another state intervenes in Somalia, which is a recognised state which has its right to territorial integrity. And of course we saw that with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, didn't we? That there the UN Security Council mobilized on the rationale of collective security against the Iraqi regime at that time. It may not be so easy to mobilize against the Israelis, but nevertheless, the same principle will apply. They are intervening effectively in a matter of the sovereignty of the state of Somalia, which is recognized and a member of the United Nations.
Well, on that point, as always, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us there from Sydney, Mr. Tim Anderson, Director of the